Okay, so here is my Famicom Classic Mini, or Family Computer, by Nintendo, and I've modded mine, and I'll show you in the back, to have a controller port. So this is the same controller port that was used in the Wii remote that connected the nunchuck and the various types of classic controllers, and it's the same controller port used in the NES Classic Mini. So what I did here was I got some Wii or NES Classic extension cords and used it to replace the controller cords on the Famicom Mini. Now I can use whichever controller I want. So for example, here I'm using a Wii Classic controller. So here I can plug in any controller as long as it has the Wii type of connector. If you don't want to use the little mini size controllers included with the console, then you can install this mod so you can use another controller that's more comfortable to hold. And it works great. Even the Y and X buttons work. The home button will actually take you to the main menu so you don't have to press the reset button on the console. Now I'm not sure, but you may need to install HackChi 2 to get additional controllers to work. I've already had it installed on mine before I did this mod. With HackChi 2, you can add language options and even add new game ROMs. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do this mod. Okay, so let's go over some things that you will need. Okay, first you will need at least 2 Wii extension cables. I recommend an extra 1 or 2 so you can actually use them. You will need at least 2 JST 6-pin 1.5mm cables. You can get a pack of 10 of these for less than $2 off of eBay. Okay, you will need some scissors and wire cutters, or wire strippers. You will need a precision screwdriver set for electronics. You will need a multimeter. This is very important. You don't want to mess this up. You need electrical tape or shrink tubes. And if you want to secure your wires to be as strong as possible, you can use a soldering iron. Okay, so first step, let's cut an extension cord at 20 centimeters or 8 inches from the female end. Okay, next we need to strip the cord at 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches from the cut end. Okay, next we need to strip each of the wires so we can use them. Make sure you give yourself enough length to work with. Okay, the next step, we will need to prepare the JST cables. On the left, we have the original Famicom JST cable, and on the right, we can see my new one. Now mine came colored in reverse order, so we will need to fix that first. Pull out the wire tips by lifting the little plastic tabs. From left to right, the wires should go from white to empty to green to yellow to black to red. We won't be using the blue wire. Now you also don't actually need to use the black wire. The black wire is used for device detect. The Famicom Classic Mini doesn't use it originally, but the NES Classic Mini does. So I've added mine just in case it's used by other controller types. And to finish this step, strip the ends of the wires and make sure you give yourself enough length to work with. Okay, now for our next step, we will be performing a continuity test on the extension cords with our multimeter. So on the multimeter, we need to switch it to the continuity test, which you can see right here. It looks kind of like a sound wave. So let's switch that on, and right now it displays a 1. So when we're in this mode, what will happen is we will hear a beep and the numbers on the display will change when the tips of these black and red prongs when they touch. So for example here, we can see it's connected, so we have the continuity connection going through here. So here is a diagram of each pin inside the female port connector of the extension cord. Pin 1 is for power, pin 2 is for clock, pin 3 is for device detect, pin 4 is unused, pin 5 is for data, and pin 6 is our ground wire. Now the reason we need to do a continuity test is to determine which colored wires belong to each pin. Don't assume the extension cords you bought were properly color coded, because they most likely aren't. Mine was all over the place. Green was for power, black was clock, white was device detect, red was data, and yellow was the ground wire. And you don't want to miswire your extension port. At best, it just won't work, and at worst, you could send 3.3 volts of power into the wrong port of your controller. To begin the continuity test, connect one prong to pin 1 and place the other prong on each wire until your multimeter changes numbers and beeps. Do this for all the other pins except pin 4. It might be a good idea to keep notes of which pin is what color. Next step is to wire the extension cords to the JST cables. Once you've determined what color wires belong to each pin in the extension cord, you need to bridge the wires together to the appropriate JST wires. You can either do this by the cross-fold twist method and secure the wires with electrical tape, or if you have the know-how, you can bridge the wires together with a soldering iron. When done, it should look like this. Do these steps again to make another one. You might even want to do another continuity test to make sure the connections are good and that you didn't make any mistakes. Okay, the next step is to open up the Famicom Classic Mini and install the new controller port cables. From the bottom of the console, remove the 4 rubber pads and the 4 screws. The casing should then easily open right up. Now we need to unscrew the main board. Remove the 5 screws here, 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 and here. Turn the main board over. Locate the controller ports. Disconnect the JST connectors and remove the controller cables. Now we can install our new controller port cables. Connect the new JST connectors, turn the main board back over, and route the new cables through the grip track thing. Make sure the controller ports are sticking out at equal length. I did mine at just 1.5 centimeters. Once you've got the new cable secured into position, it's time to put our screws back into the main board. Be careful not to accidentally install a screw in this hole here. Putting the bottom casing back on can be a little tricky. If any of the cables inside get in the way of the little plastic prongs, you may need to adjust the cables to avoid them. Don't force it on or you could damage the cables. Lastly, once you've gotten the bottom case lined up properly, reinstall the 4 screws. Just as a notice, these next couple steps are optional. If you don't want to use the original Famicom Mini controllers anymore, then you can put them aside, and should you ever want to go back to stock, just reinstall the controllers. So if you're only going to be using a Wii Classic controller or other supported controllers, then you're done. However, if you do want to keep using the Famicom Mini controllers with this mod, you can use the leftover extension cords with the male ends and replace the original cords of your controllers. To be clear, this is a permanent change. The wires inside the controllers are soldered onto the board, so you'll have to cut the wires to do this mod. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is prepare our leftover extension cords. Just like with the female side of the cords, you need to strip the end of each cord at about 4 centimeters or 1.5 inches. Then strip each wire and give yourself enough length to work with. The next step is to install the male side extension cords to the controllers. Take a controller, remove the 5 screws on the back, and remove the back cover. Here we can see the 4 wires being used with this controller: red for power, yellow for clock, green for data, and white for ground. The black device detect wire isn't used here. Cut the controller cord at about 2 centimeters or 1 inch from the controller and strip it. Then strip each of the wires, leaving yourself enough length to work with. Be very careful not to accidentally cut the wires when you strip them. These ones are soldered onto the board and aren't so easily replaceable. Remember your notes? Take your extension cord and bridge the wires to the appropriate wires on the controller. Ensure the cord is secured well between the plastic grip prongs. And lastly, close it back up and reinstall the 5 screws. Then do the step again for the other controller. Our final step is to test everything. If your controllers aren't working, do a process of elimination to find out what the problem is. If the controller isn't working in one player port, see if it works in another. Try different controllers. Do a continuity test on the problematic player port cord with an extension cord plugged into it to rule out any problems with damaged pins. If everything works, then you're all set to go. So there you have it, a Famicom Classic Mini with controller ports. If you ever have or ever wanted a Famicom Classic Mini or considered getting one over the NES Classic Mini because they're cheaper, but you didn't like the fact that the controllers are wired directly into the console or that you couldn't use bigger controllers, then this solves that problem. Just plug in any supported controller, or maybe even an 8-bit DOE controller, and you're all set. So that's it. I hope you found this video useful. Happy modding.